Hey guys, can you tell me something? Who is the enemy here? Is the enemy fat or is the enemy carbs? Which one do I need to cut out? There has been a ton of craze on low-fat diets, low-carb diets, and you need to follow one of these specifically to start lowering your cholesterol, lower your risk for heart disease, and to improve your life. But which one do you follow? For a long time now, we've been told that low-fat is the way to go. And now we're starting to see that that's actually not the case. So many people are now saying that low carb is the way to go, and you need to eat more fats. This can get really confusing. And one interesting thing that came out recently from the American Heart Association is they found that your dietary cholesterol does not play a role in heart disease anymore. So this is a new finding. The cholesterol that you get in your diet, it does not play a role in heart disease. So there used to be some guidelines on how much cholesterol you need to get in your diet and how much cholesterol you should limit it to. But now they've kind of abolished those because there's no accurate studies that show a significant risk for heart disease. So does that mean that I can go out and I can eat whatever I want and not be at a high risk for heart disease? Well, no, because other foods can raise your risk for heart disease a whole lot. And two of these foods that can really raise your risk for heart disease are refined carbohydrates and saturated fats. Okay, I get it. I can't eat any carbs and I can't eat any fat. Both of them are the enemy. Well, actually, that's not the case either. We need both of them. We need both carbs and we need both fats. Really, it depends on the source of the food that you're eating. Are you eating a bunch of flaming hot Cheetos every day and goldfish and crackers, and that's how you're getting all your carbohydrates? Or are you eating a lot of fruits and vegetables? Both of them have carbohydrates. And it's the same thing with your fats. Are you getting good sources of fats or are you getting bad sources of fat? So let's focus on fat. Again, like I said, saturated fat is associated with heart disease. And there was actually a study from Harvard. So what they did was they studied these people that eat saturated fats and they swapped those saturated fats out with unsaturated fats. And the results were a lower risk for heart disease. And they also tried swapping these saturated fats out with whole grains. And again, there was a lower risk for heart disease. So in both of these instances, whether you ate unsaturated fats or whole grains, which is a type of carbohydrate, you had a lower risk for heart disease. And then they tried swapping out these saturated fats with refined grains. And refined grains are foods like, those processed foods or like white bread or like Cheetos again or other unhealthy snacks. And again, you still had a high risk for heart disease. And in this scenario, your risk for heart disease did not go down. Now, there is an exception to this saturated fat rule, and it is chocolate. Chocolate is the one saturated fat that does not raise your risk for heart disease. Chocolate specifically has a saturated fat called stearic acid, and for some reason, this does not increase our risk for heart disease. So there is such a thing as good fats and bad fats. Not all fats were created equal. So does that mean that I can never eat these saturated fats and I need to get rid of butter and red meat and all these other saturated fat foods from my diet? Well, no, you can still have some. And actually, studies are showing that if you limit your saturated fats to about 10% of your total caloric intake, then you are pretty much good. And if you limit it to 10% or less, then you do not have a seriously high risk of getting heart disease. But the best types of fats for you are things like polyunsaturated fats or monounsaturated fats. Actually, polyunsaturated fats might be a little bit better. So polyunsaturated fats, or PUFAs, are things like fish, things like walnuts, or sunflower seeds. And monounsaturated fats, or MUFAs, are things like avocados and olive oil. So it's the same thing with carbohydrates. You have some good carbohydrates and some bad carbohydrates. And refined carbohydrates are the ones that are really bad. So what, you have your Cheetos, your white bread, your goldfish, all these things we all know are not good for you. And also these refined carbohydrates, they can increase your risk for heart disease as well. And they'll also spike your glucose levels. In turn, they'll spike your insulin levels. And over time, they can lead to something called insulin resistance. And that's basically where your body does not respond to insulin as well. And this is one thing that can lead to diabetes. But at the same time, you have good carbohydrates like whole grains or things like fruits and vegetables. And eating these types of foods instead will actually lower your risk for heart disease. So you see, the argument shouldn't be about should I have a low carb or a low fat diet. It should be what do I replace my bad foods with? So again, for example, refined carbohydrates. If you eat a ton of these, then you have a higher risk for heart disease. But if you replace these refined carbohydrates and you replace them with saturated fats, your risk for heart disease doesn't change. And there's studies that are supporting this. But if you replace these refined carbs with those PUFAs or MUFAs or those unsaturated fats, now your heart disease risk starts to go down. Also, if you replace these refined carbs with whole grains, which is a different type of carbohydrate, again, your risk for heart disease goes down. So anytime you hear someone start saying, don't eat any of this, don't ever eat carbohydrates, or don't ever eat fats, instead only eat this, now you should have your guard up. Take it with a grain of salt. Now I know this can get confusing, but I hope this kind of helped clarify some things. And to help clarify it a little bit more, instead of focusing on all the nitty-gritty details like how much fat I should be eating or how many carbs I should be eating, instead try focusing on eating whole foods. What is your diet like throughout the day? Are you drinking Coke all the time or other soda beverages? Or are you snacking on chips or Cheetos or other unhealthy foods? Are you eating a lot of pastries every day? If you're doing all this, you shouldn't be asking yourself about a low carb versus low fat diet. You should be starting there. Here are some things that everyone can focus on. If you're gonna drink something, make water your choice of drink. If you're gonna eat carbohydrates, eat whole grains. Or you can eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. Also, make sure you're getting high quality protein. And don't stress too much about fat. It will come naturally in your diet. And remember guys, anytime someone says you should focus specifically on eating this and avoid eating all other types of food, have your guard up and do a little bit of your own research. Just because I never eat carbohydrates again, it doesn't mean that I'm actually that much healthier, because I could be replacing it with something that's equally unhealthy. And the same thing goes with if I replace all my fats with something else that's unhealthy. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked that video, and if you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel below. I will see you in the next video.